Episode 2. 2 weeks. That was how long the dorm room had felt less like student housing and more like a high-stakes Cold War standoff. We were two ghosts sharing the same space, navigating a schedule of rigid avoidance. I left for the studio before she woke. She returned from practice after I'd turned off my light. The aggressive silence was exhausting, but at this point, it was clear we weren't going to be BFFs. Sophie Mercer had betrayed my trust. She had lied to me by pretending to be out and proud while having a boyfriend, and I wasn't the kind to forgive. But the problem with a Cold War is that your enemy is still visible. I was sitting on the top row of the bleachers, sketching the sprawling, crisp autumn landscape for my independent study. The air was sharp and cool, and I was determined to focus on the distant tree line and the angle of the light. Focus on the light, Iris, not your roommate. Yet my charcoal kept betraying me. It drifted from the static hills and began to map the violent kinetic energy of the soccer field below. Sophie was on the pitch, running drills with the intensity of someone trying to outrun a terrible secret. She was the captain, barking orders, her voice sharp and commanding. She wasn't just fast, she was brutal in her tackles, but elegant in her recovery. Her focus was absolute, transforming the casual, smiling roommate into a relentless warrior. She's supposed to be a shallow party girl, I thought, the resentment like a dull ache, not a genius athlete. That much talent and that much cheerfulness should be illegal. My hand moved on its own, quickly capturing the curve of Sophie's calf as she kicked a ball, the perfect controlled tension of the muscle. It wasn't landscape architecture, it was unwilling portraiture. A shadow fell over my sketchpad. Still documenting the misery of your existence, Iris? Hello, Maya, I said without looking up, quickly covering the drawing with a stray leaf. Maya dropped onto the bench next to me, bringing the scent of spiced chai and disapproval. Don't hello Maya me. You haven't had a genuine conversation with me in a week, and your texts are 3 words long. How's the roommate situation? It's fine. We have an agreement, silence and non-acknowledgement. It's working for my productivity. It's working for your eventual breakdown, Maya corrected gently, and judging by your artistic muse down there, the silence isn't doing much for your emotional temperature. She nudged the sketchpad. I pulled it closer. I'm drawing the field, Maya, pure geometry, as she so eloquently put it. I am studying the interplay of force and grace. Right, and I'm studying the delicate geometry of your heart getting pierced by a sophomore athlete. She's a senior athlete, and no, I insisted, reverting to the safe, hostile narrative I'd built for myself. She's fake. She's performative. She claimed to be very out and very proud, and then brought that Mark to the party, hanging off his arm, calling him babe. She's a tourist. She's centering men for attention, and I refuse to be part of her messy experiment again. Maya was silent for a moment, watching the field. Sophie was tearing down the wing, defending a rival player with merciless efficiency. I'd know your ex messed you up bad, Riss, Maya said, the gentle seed of doubt planting itself in the hard earth of my certainty. But I got serious bestie vibes from Mark and 0 boyfriend vibes. Are you sure you aren't seeing what you expect to see because of Riley? Of course, what Maya said made total sense. Mark could just be a friend of a classmate, and maybe my jealousy was doing the thinking instead of my brain, but I wasn't amenable to reason right now. Besides, there was no solid proof that she hadn't lied. I scoffed, tossing a pebble onto the field. The optics were clear, Maya. I've learned that lesson the hard way. Just then, Sophie received a pass near the center line. She didn't look at the crowd, she didn't look at the bench, her focus was purely on the goal. She delivered a crisp, powerful shot that sliced past the goalie and into the net. The small group of spectators roared. Sophie simply high-fived her teammates, her expression one of focused satisfaction, not attention-seeking triumph. I watched the celebration, the doubt a dull pressure in my chest. Am I wrong? But the memory of Riley's smirk was still too strong. See, I whispered, pulling my jacket tighter. Efficient, merciless. Don't trust the sun, Maya. It just blinds you. Whatever you say, Maya sighed, but you're going to need that hostility because I checked the roster for our Feminist Theory class. Guess who just enrolled? I looked down at the field, dread coiling in my stomach. Sophie? Bingo. The universe truly hated me. The Feminist Theory seminar room was everything the bleachers were not: small, intimate, and designed for intellectual enrichment. It smelled like stale coffee and old paper. When I walked in 20 minutes later, clutching my annotated copy of Gender Trouble, I was ready to face the world, just not the version of it wearing Ashton's soccer shorts. Sophie Mercer was already there, sitting in the semicircle of chairs, casually dominating the visual field. She was in a university team hoodie, leggings, and immaculate sneakers, radiating the kind of health that made my coffee addiction feel like a moral failure. She looked like she was about to do a plank, not analyze Judith Butler. Of course she's here. Probably needs an easy Gen Ed JF. Probably thinks the male gaze is a name of a new sports drink. I slid into the seat farthest from her, dropping my backpack with a thump that earned a few stares. I refused to look her way, focusing instead on the professor, Dr. Alvarez, a woman whose severity I found deeply comforting. "Good afternoon, class," Dr. Alvarez began, her voice crisp. "Today, we're moving into performance theory, specifically the idea of how we package the self. I've decided to assign a quick in-class debate: the performance of femininity as a shield versus the performance of femininity as a capitulation." My pencil stopped mid-note. Debate. Perfect. I could eviscerate this topic. Dr. Alvarez looked at her class list. "Due to the uneven numbers, you'll be working in pairs, and I've chosen those pairs randomly based on your submission essay scores. Miss Hart, you will be working with Miss Mercer." My blood ran cold. The low growl I let out was barely audible, but Sophie heard it. I could feel her smile from across the room. "Well, Iris," Sophie's low voice cut through the nervous shuffle of textbooks, "looks like we are stuck together for this one. Hope you brought a strong coffee. I'm defending the shield." I stood up, gathering my books, already preparing an exit strategy. "I'll work alone, Dr. Alvarez. I'd prefer to avoid any academic malpractice." "Nonsense, Iris," Dr. Alvarez said, unmoved. "You're both brilliant students. Work together, please. Now move." I glowered and howled my chair over, dragging it with a painful screech across the linoleum until I was forced to sit next to Sophie. Our knees were close enough to brush, and the accidental proximity was a violation of all the terms of our Cold War. "Relax, Hart," Sophie murmured, flipping open her notebook, which to my shock was already highlighted and annotated. "Performance of femininity as a shield," she stated, quoting verbatim. "A woman's strategic display of hyperfemininity is not a sign of surrender to the patriarchy, but a calculated camouflage, an unassuming vessel to carry a subversive intellect." That's Butler, page 87, and I'm arguing it. I find it deeply reductive to assume that competence only comes in a hoodie. My mouth, for the first time in our acquaintance, snapped shut. She read the text, and she quoted it. "Don't sound so surprised, Hart," continued Sophie, leaning in just enough that I could smell the faint, clean scent of her soap. Not sweat, not perfume, just clean. "Just because I spend my life being looked at doesn't mean I haven't studied why I'm being looked at." The intellectual spike of attraction was a physical jolt, hotter and more terrifying than the physical attraction itself. The vapid label I'd slapped on her slid off like cheap paint. She's smart, she's challenging, she's everything I claim to want, but wrapped in the packaging I desperately fear. I shook my head. This was just another part of her show. She was a good liar. When we were called to present, the air in the room grew charged. "The shield is fundamentally a self-imposed limitation," I stated, my tone even and academic. "It's a costume that makes the individual easily consumable. By choosing to embody the cute girl in the ponytail, you become easily digestible for the structure you claim to fight. You are giving away immediate power by playing on the visual field. That is capitulation, dressed up as strategy." Sophie faced the class, but her body language, shoulders squared, arms loosely folded, was aimed at me. Power is adaptation, Iris. The world always looks. Femininity is a visual field we're forced to operate in, whether we wear a dress or a hoodie. The shield argues that since you cannot escape the looking, you must control the interpretation. Interpretation doesn't equal control, I countered instantly. It's a rationalization for conforming. The minute you rely on being unexpected, you've conceded the baseline assumption that you should be underestimated. You waste energy on presentation that should be spent on performance. Sophie's eyes narrowed slightly, acknowledging the strength of the point. And you waste energy on being prickly. My argument is that the shield provides an unassuming vessel for subversive action, as Butler suggests. It's a strategy of survival. For instance, she continued, her voice dropping a fraction, I am able to get funding for my all-women soccer clinic because I present as the harmless golden girl captain, not the aggressive revolutionary. I use their assumption against them. I pressed the attack, driving the point toward her personal life. And what about personal performance? You're playing to the expectations of a specific audience. That doesn't challenge the norm, but supports it. You're trying to act like everyone else around you, to play the roles that are socially acceptable instead of the ones that are true. Isn't that the role women have been subjugated to for years? There was a personal agenda under my argument. She's brought her boyfriend to the party despite confessing her disinterest in men, and it made me uncomfortable that she was unexpectedly smart. The shield can be honest too. The choice to dress a certain way to leave a certain impression is still a choice. On the contrary, you assuming I'm a dumb jock because of the way I dress proves my point. That's how powerful the shield is. Even an intellectual like you is unable to look beyond first impressions. Why shouldn't women use it to their advantage? I inhaled sharply as Dr. Alvarez smiled, my weakness out in the open. She had argued well, pointing out my own prejudice to me, and she'd maintained her composure perfectly. However, before delivering her final strike, I felt cornered. That was a good debate, Dr. Alvarez said as the bell rang. Good point, Sophie. My blonde roommate beamed, making my heart skip a beat. I turned away, slightly nervous and miffed. I realized, with a sickening mix of defeat and the thrill of having been truly challenged, that I had failed to take her down. Instead, she had seen through my academic argument, identified the source of my hostility, and used it to land a devastating personal counterblow. I hadn't just lost the debate, I had just lost control of the war. As we went back to our seats, Sophie said, "It's good to hear your voice, finally." I blinked, realizing she was referencing our Cold War. Her blonde eyes met mine, and I felt winded from walking 2 steps. "I thought you'd lost it." "Oh, I very much have a voice, and you might be hearing a lot more of it during the debate." She smiled, never taking things I say personally, which I realized with a sickening mix of defeat and the thrill of having been challenged that I was completely, utterly outmatched. Sophie Mercer was not a shallow attention seeker. She was an intensely focused, frighteningly intelligent woman who saw the entire field. And now she saw me, and I loved it. The intimacy of the debate had left me vibrating with a tense, manic energy. By the time I returned to room 418, I felt utterly exposed and desperate to rebuild my walls. The room was blessedly quiet. Sophie's side was empty. The assumption was that she was at practice, sweating out her intellectual triumph. I hauled my chair to the easel, intending to attack a fresh canvas, but I couldn't focus. I needed a witness, a reset button, someone to confirm that I was right to hate Sophie Mercer. I sent Maya a frantic text. Emergency. Code, yellow cadmium. Bring wine. Maya arrived 5 minutes later. She didn't bother with the door. She just walked straight to the small bathroom connected to our dorm suite to fill up my tiny water jug. "I can't believe she quoted Butler at me," I groaned, pacing my half of the room, my voice lacking the edge from the classroom debate. Maya emerged, looking thoughtful. "Maybe your perception is the problem, Iris. Maybe she is exactly who she said she was." "No, Maya, she's a liar," I erupted, the control I'd maintained for 2 weeks finally snapping. "She's a tourist, just like Riley." I didn't notice the shadow outside the half-open door, the first warning of Sophie's presence. Maya sat on the edge of my bed, her voice lowering with concern. "Talk to me, Iris. Why does she feel so much like Riley?" I sank onto the floor amidst my spilled tubes of Payne's gray and cadmium yellow. The anger was gone, replaced with the raw, humiliated pain I usually kept locked down. "It wasn't just the cheating, Maya," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "Everyone saw the screaming match in the cafeteria. Everyone saw me fall apart in critique. People stared at me for months, pitied me, said I'd move on, but I felt so used, like I meant nothing to her while she meant everything to me." I looked up at Maya, tears finally stinging my eyes. She said she was using me as an experiment, trying me out before going back to her ex, and I was the one who got too serious and started expecting long-term. I balled my fists in the soft, worn fabric of my jeans. I hate her because she represents the danger of falling for someone who isn't safe, and I hate myself because I still want her to look at me. A long, heavy silence descended on the room, broken only by my shaky breathing. Then, a faint, barely audible sound, the slow, careful shift of weight, came from the shadows outside the door. Maya moved, holding me. "It's okay, Iris. You'll get over it someday, but I know how deep Riley's betrayal cut." I held my best friend, letting the burden inside me lighten a little. "I'm here for you, however long it takes." "Thanks," I sniffed, still not knowing that Sophie stood outside the door, listening to me bare my heart. It took her 5 more seconds to open the door, to come bursting in like nothing had happened. "Good evening, Hart." Her gaze moved to Maya. "Maya, looks like someone's been having a wine party in the room while I was gone." She put her bag on her table, and I moved away from Maya, making sure she didn't know of my misery. The dormitory air was thick and cold when I finally climbed into bed. The raw, ugly truth about Riley and the humiliation of having been seen by Maya in that state left me shaky. I pulled the duvet up to my chin, staring into the oppressive dark, listening to the patter of a sudden, cold rain beginning to fall outside the window. I was awake long after the usual silence of the dorm settled in. A quiet sound cut through the rain, a muffled sigh from Sophie's bed. Then her voice, low and reflective, spoke into the encompassing darkness. She didn't turn on her light, she didn't shift. "I hate this silence, Iris," Sophie admitted, her voice trembling slightly, laced with unexpected vulnerability. "It's worse than yelling. It feels like we're strangers sharing a tomb." I gripped the duvet tighter, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I didn't want to talk, but the raw honesty in her tone was disarming. "I know you think I'm easy," Sophie continued, her voice catching just a little. "Easy with a smile, easy with my life, easy to figure out. But I'm not. You were right about one thing, though. I am performing. It's my shield. The Captain Sophie thing is suffocating sometimes." I heard her shift, and I could feel the weight of her sincerity across the dividing space. "It's what people want to see, right?" she asked the ceiling. "They want the leader who is never scared, never hurt, never makes a mistake. They see the cheerful charmer and they think they know the whole story. They don't see the hours of pain, the injuries, the fear that one bad game will make them regret putting a captain's band on my arm." My heart thudded, taking in her confessions. I wanted to know more about her, but was too afraid to ask. She paused, and the silence this time felt heavy with shared secrets, even if I didn't know hers. "I perform because I'm terrified of letting my team down. It's easier to be the golden girl than the one who's scared she's going to mess up the final play. I don't claim to be selfless, but I think everyone likes a person who is full of warmth." The emotional vulnerability stripped away the last of my defensive anger. This wasn't the shallow jock I had invented. This was a woman under intense pressure, wrestling with her own expectations. It paralleled my own fear of failure, my own need to hide behind a mask of indifference. But at least she had the courage to talk about it. I finally responded, the words rough and barely audible, forcing myself to participate in the sincerity. "It's exhausting," I admitted, speaking from my own experience with art critiques, the effort of having to maintain our Cold War. "Cold War? Is that what we're calling it?" Her bright tone made me smile.
The opportunity felt terrifyingly clear. I had to apologize for the malice, not the defense. "I owe you an apology, Sophie," I whispered, turning my head toward her shadow, "for the party and for the class." "You don't owe me anything." "I do," I interrupted softly. "I judged you. I decided immediately that you were just another dumb jock here for an easy ride. I assumed you were vapid and that the world was effortless for you. I weaponized my own assumptions against you, and that was unfair. You're not dumb, and you're clearly not easy." A small, genuine chuckle came from her side of the room. "Thank you, Iris. That's actually the nicest thing you've said to me." "It's the truth," I confirmed. I wanted to apologize for the Mark comment, but the lie about his relationship status still felt too fragile to address. "I accept your apology," Sophie said simply. She paused, then added, her voice warm, "Does that mean our Cold War is over?" "Yeah." My voice was low, but solid. I closed my eyes, the cold knot in my stomach finally loosening. "Good night, Sophie," I said, using her name deliberately, letting the sound sit naturally in the darkness. "Good night, Iris." It might have been the first time she used my given name. I fell asleep listening to the steady rhythm of the rain, no longer focused on my anger, but on the sudden, terrifyingly real weight of having an honest person in the dark beside me.